kept asking myself one question while looking at these cars. Who thought this was a good idea? They look strange, drive differently, and some seem to make absolutely no sense. But every one of them was real. The 1935 Morgan Supersports, I honestly didn't know whether I was looking at a real automobile or someone's homemade racing machine. 3 wheels, an exposed front end, a tiny cockpit, and an engine sitting right out in the open. It looked almost unfinished, like someone had built half a race car in their garage, attached 3 wheels to it, and somehow convinced a manufacturer to sell it to the public. But the craziest part? People actually bought these things and drove them on public roads. At first glance, the Morgan Supersports looks completely impractical. Most cars of the 1930s had 4 wheels, enclosed bodywork, a conventional cabin, and plenty of space for the driver. The Morgan took a completely different approach. It was incredibly low, extremely light, and only had 3 wheels. The front end was almost completely exposed, giving the car the appearance of a miniature racing machine. It didn't look like something designed for a comfortable Sunday drive. It looked like something built specifically to make the driver feel every inch of the road. And that's because Morgan came from a very different engineering tradition. The company had been building lightweight 3-wheel vehicles for years, long before the modern sports car industry developed. Morgan believed that you didn't need a huge engine or a heavy chassis to create an exciting driving experience. You needed low weight, a simple mechanical layout, and enough power to make the car fun. The Supersports followed exactly that philosophy. One of the most interesting things about the Morgan is how little car you actually get. There's no massive hood, no enormous cabin, no huge amount of bodywork separating you from the outside world. Instead, you're sitting in a tiny cockpit with the road, engine, suspension, and mechanical components all around you. It's almost like sitting inside a piece of machinery rather than a conventional automobile. The front end is probably the feature that shocked me the most. The 2 front wheels are positioned out in the open with the suspension and steering components clearly visible. There is almost no attempt to hide the mechanical parts. On a modern car, everything is covered by body panels. With the Morgan, the engineering is part of the visual design. You can actually see the machine working. And then there's the engine. Depending on the version, Morgan used small engines that were perfectly suited to its lightweight construction. Because the car was so light, it didn't need a giant power plant to feel quick. That's another thing that makes the Supersports interesting. The car didn't try to overpower the road. It tried to minimize everything that wasn't absolutely necessary. Less weight, less bodywork, less complexity, more driving. Imagine taking one of these onto a public road in 1935. You would be surrounded by much larger cars, 4 wheels, enclosed cabins, large bodies, heavy engines. Then you arrive in this tiny 3-wheeled machine. People probably couldn't decide whether to laugh or stare. And once you started moving, the Morgan would probably look even more unusual. The driver sitting incredibly low, the front wheels bouncing over the road, and the engine making noise right in front of you. It must have been an unforgettable sight. The Morgan's 3-wheeled layout also gave it a very distinctive personality. Instead of behaving exactly like a normal 4-wheeled automobile, it had its own driving characteristics. The lightweight construction made it responsive, the low seating position made the driver feel close to the road, and the open mechanical design made even ordinary driving feel like an event. This wasn't a car you simply used to get somewhere. Driving it was the whole point. That's something modern cars have largely lost. Today, even performance cars are filled with insulation, electronics, driver assistance systems, screens, sensors, and safety equipment. They're incredibly capable, but they can also separate the driver from the mechanical experience. The Morgan Supersports was the complete opposite. There was almost nothing between you and the machine. You could hear the engine, feel the suspension, see the front wheels working, and experience the road directly. But what I find funniest is that this wasn't some crazy experimental prototype. People actually bought these things. They weren't sitting in a museum as an engineering experiment. They were sold to customers who looked at this strange three-wheeled machine and apparently thought, yes, I'll take one. That alone makes the Morgan fascinating. The car also reflects the economic and technological realities of the 1930s. Not everyone could afford a large luxury automobile. Lightweight three-wheelers could offer lower running costs and simpler construction. Morgan found a way to turn those limitations into an advantage. Instead of apologizing for being small, the company made lightweight performance part of the vehicle's identity. That philosophy became an important part of Morgan's reputation. The company continued building cars that emphasized lightweight construction and traditional craftsmanship long after most manufacturers moved towards heavier, more complex vehicles. The Supersports was an early expression of that philosophy. It showed that a sports car didn't need to be enormous to be exciting. Of course, from today's perspective, the car looks almost ridiculous. If you saw one parked next to a modern sports car, the difference would be hilarious. A modern sports car is wide, low, powerful, technologically advanced, and packed with safety systems. The Morgan looks like a mechanical skeleton with a tiny seat attached, but that's exactly why it's so memorable. It wasn't trying to compete with modern ideas. It came from a completely different understanding of what a sports car needed to be. What really gets me is the confidence behind it. Someone had to look at this design and decide 3 wheels are enough. Someone had to decide that the front suspension didn't need to be hidden. Someone had to decide that the cockpit could be tiny. And someone had to believe customers would actually want to drive it. And somehow, they were right. The 1935 Morgan Supersports wasn't the fastest car in the world. It wasn't the most luxurious, it certainly wasn't the safest, but it was something much rarer. It was completely different. It represented a time when automotive designers could build a vehicle around the pure experience of driving without worrying about making it look like every other car on the road. And that's why I think this car deserves to be number one. The first time I saw it, I genuinely thought it looked like a homemade racing machine. But the more I learned about it, the more impressive it became. It was light, simple, mechanical, and completely unapologetic about being strange. 3 wheels, a tiny cockpit, and exposed front end. And somehow that was enough to create a real road-going sports car. Honestly, I still can't believe people looked at this thing in 1935 and thought, that's the car I want to drive. And yet, they did.
1949 Crosley Hot Shot? I honestly thought someone had taken a real race car and simply shrunk it in half. Everything about it looked tiny. The body, the wheels, the cockpit, even the engine seemed almost too small to be powering an actual sports car. And yet this little machine wasn't a toy. It was a real road-going automobile and one of America's earliest post-war sports cars. What makes the Hot Shot so surprising is the period in which it appeared. America was entering the post-war era, and most people were fascinated by large automobiles. Big engines, wide bodies, comfortable interiors, lots of chrome. Detroit was moving toward bigger and more powerful cars. Then Crosley came along with something that looked almost completely opposite, a tiny, lightweight sports car designed around simplicity rather than size. The Crosley Hot Shot was extremely compact. It had a short body, a very low seating position, and almost no unnecessary weight. There wasn't much separating the driver from the outside world. You sat close to the road, surrounded by a small amount of bodywork, with the engine working directly in front of you. Compared with a modern sports car, it looks almost unbelievably exposed. And that's one of the first things that shocked me. Today, when we think about a sports car, we imagine a wide body, thick doors, airbags, reinforced structures, and a long list of safety systems. The Hot Shot had almost none of that. It was a very different philosophy. The goal was simple: keep it light. If the car weighed very little, it didn't need a huge engine to feel fast. That principle would eventually become extremely important in sports car design. The Hot Shot's engine was tiny by American standards. Instead of the enormous V8s that would soon dominate the American market, Crosley used a small four-cylinder engine. It wasn't powerful by modern standards, but because the car itself was so light, the little engine didn't have to work very hard to make the Hot Shot entertaining. This was a completely different way of achieving performance. Imagine lining it up beside a typical American car from the same period. The difference would be almost comical. One car would be long, heavy, and wide. The Crosley would look like it had been designed for a much smaller planet. You'd probably wonder how such a tiny automobile could possibly be considered a sports car. Then you would realize that was exactly the point. The Hot Shot proved that weight matters. You don't always need more horsepower. Sometimes you simply need less mass. That's a lesson sports car manufacturers would continue using for decades. Lightweight cars can feel quick, they can respond faster, they can change direction more easily, and they can make relatively small engines feel surprisingly lively. The Hot Shot also arrived at an interesting moment in American automotive history. Before World War II, most American automobiles were designed primarily around comfort and practicality. After the war, the market began changing rapidly. People wanted something exciting, something different, something that represented freedom and a new beginning. The Crosley Hot Shot was one of the small American cars trying to capture that spirit. It didn't have the prestige of an expensive European sports car. It didn't have a giant engine. It didn't have an exotic badge. But it had something else: personality. The Hot Shot looked completely different from the huge American cars surrounding it. It was small enough to feel almost playful, but it was still a serious automobile. One of the most interesting details is how simple the car was. There wasn't much room for unnecessary equipment. The designers focused on keeping the vehicle compact and lightweight. That simplicity helped create a very direct driving experience. You weren't surrounded by layers of technology. You were essentially sitting inside a tiny mechanical machine. And that's what I imagine must have made the Hot Shot so much fun. The steering, the engine noise, the lightweight body, the low seating position, the feeling that there was almost nothing between you and the road. It probably felt much faster than the numbers suggested. The car also became significant because it arrived at an interesting moment in American automotive history. Later, America would produce legendary performance cars such as the Corvette and numerous muscle cars. But in the late 1940s, the American sports car scene was still very small. The Crosley Hot Shot was one of the early attempts to create a compact, affordable sports car for American buyers. And that's why I think it's easy to overlook. If you only look at the car's size, you might assume it was some strange little economy vehicle, but that would miss the entire point. This wasn't about saving space. It was about creating an inexpensive, lightweight machine that could actually be fun to drive. Imagine seeing one on an American road in 1949. You're driving alongside enormous sedans and pickup trucks. Then this tiny little roadster appears. The driver is sitting almost directly on the road. The body is barely wider than the wheels. The engine sounds much smaller than the cars around it, and yet it's moving confidently through traffic. You'd probably stare at it just as much as people stare at exotic cars today. What I find especially interesting is that the Hot Shot looks almost like a miniature version of the sports cars that would become popular later. The basic ingredients are already there: low body, 2 seats, lightweight construction, small engine, simple mechanical layout, driver-focused design. It's almost like an early American experiment that helped demonstrate how much fun could be created with very little. Of course, the Hot Shot wasn't perfect. It was tiny, it was basic, it offered very little protection compared with modern cars, and for many Americans accustomed to large automobiles, it probably seemed almost ridiculous. But that's also why it deserves attention. It didn't try to become what it wasn't, it embraced its small size. The 1949 Crosley Hot Shot proved that an American sports car didn't have to be huge. It didn't need a massive V8, it didn't need acres of chrome. It didn't need a giant body. It simply needed to be light enough, small enough, and exciting enough to make the driver smile. When I first saw it, I thought someone had taken a real race car and simply shrunk it in half. After learning its story, that description still feels pretty accurate. It really does look like a miniature racing machine that somehow escaped onto public roads, and that's exactly what makes it so memorable. Tiny body, tiny engine, almost no protection, and a surprisingly big place in American sports car history. For something this small, the Crosley Hot Shot made a surprisingly big impact.
1953 Messerschmitt KR175. I honestly had no idea what I was looking at. Calling it a car almost feels wrong. It looked more like someone took a fighter aircraft cockpit, removed the wings, added 3 wheels, and decided it could somehow be used as everyday transportation. The body was incredibly narrow. The cabin was almost completely enclosed, and instead of opening a normal door, you entered through a bubble-shaped canopy that lifted upward. It looked absolutely ridiculous, but it was a real production vehicle. The story behind the KR175 makes it even more interesting. Messerschmitt was famous for building aircraft, particularly during World War II. After the war, however, Germany faced strict limitations on aircraft production, so the company had to find other ways to use its engineering expertise. And that's where this bizarre little vehicle came in. Instead of building another conventional automobile, Messerschmitt became involved with a tiny 3-wheeled machine that looked remarkably similar to a miniature aircraft. The result was the KR175. The first thing that immediately grabs your attention is the cockpit. There are no normal doors like you'd find in a sedan. Instead, the entire transparent canopy lifts upward. You don't simply open the door and sit down. You climb into the vehicle almost like you're entering a small aircraft. Once you're inside, the narrow cabin surrounds you. The windshield curves around your field of view. And suddenly, you realize you're sitting in something that looks much more like an aircraft fuselage than a traditional automobile. The seating position is also completely unusual. The driver sits directly behind the front wheel, with the passenger sitting behind the driver in tandem. That's right, not side by side, one behind the other. This allowed Messerschmitt to keep the body incredibly narrow, and it created one of the strangest passenger arrangements ever seen in a road-going vehicle. Imagine being the passenger. You aren't sitting beside the driver like in a normal car. You're sitting directly behind them, looking over their shoulder. The whole experience must have felt completely different from driving an ordinary automobile. But that strange layout served a purpose. A narrow body required less material. It reduced weight, it reduced aerodynamic drag, and it allowed it to fit through very tight spaces. The KR175 was also incredibly lightweight. It weighed only around 220 kilograms, depending on configuration. That's astonishingly light for a road vehicle. A modern car can weigh well over 1,000 kilograms. The Messerschmitt weighed only a fraction of that. Because of the low weight, it didn't need a large engine. Underneath the tiny body was a small 2-stroke single-cylinder engine. By today's standards, the engine sounds almost comically small, but the KR175 wasn't designed to compete with powerful automobiles. It was designed to provide inexpensive personal transportation. The lightweight body meant that even a tiny engine could move it around town. And this is where the KR175 starts making more sense. After World War II, Germany was rebuilding. People needed affordable transportation. Large automobiles were expensive, fuel was not something everyone could waste, and many people simply couldn't afford a conventional car. The KR175 offered something much simpler: a roof, a seat, an engine, 3 wheels, and enough protection from the weather to make everyday travel possible. But calling it practical doesn't make it look any less crazy. From the outside, it still resembles a miniature aircraft. The transparent canopy makes it look like a fighter pilot's cockpit. The extremely narrow body makes it appear almost impossibly small, and the 3-wheel layout gives it an appearance that is completely unlike an ordinary automobile. One of the strangest things about the KR175 is the driver's relationship to the front of the machine. Because the driver sits so far forward, your feet are positioned extremely close to the front wheel area. You're essentially sitting inside the nose of the machine.
there's very little car in front of you. That must have created an incredibly unusual driving experience. And then you close the canopy. Suddenly, you're sealed inside this tiny transparent capsule. The engine is working behind you, the road is directly below, the windshield is wrapped around your view, and the entire vehicle feels more like a cockpit than a car. Honestly, I can't imagine what it must have felt like the first time someone climbed inside one in 1953. The KR175 also demonstrates how differently people thought about automobiles after the war. Today, we expect a car to be comfortable, powerful, safe, and spacious. But in the early 1950s, the priority for many buyers was simply affordable mobility. If a tiny machine could get you from one place to another using very little fuel and power, it could be extremely valuable. The KR175 was a product of that unusual period. And despite its strange appearance, the idea worked well enough to lead to further development. The KR175 was eventually followed by the larger and more powerful KR200, which became even more famous. The basic concept remained the same: 3 wheels, tandem seating, aircraft-inspired canopy, extremely lightweight construction. It was a completely different approach to personal transportation. What fascinates me most is the connection to Messerschmitt's aircraft background. You can almost see the influence immediately. The streamlined body, the cockpit canopy, the narrow fuselage-like shape, the tandem seating, everything seems inspired by aviation. It looks as though an aircraft designer was told, "You can't build airplanes anymore, build a car." And instead of making a normal car, they apparently thought, "Fine, I'll build a tiny airplane without wings." Imagine this thing driving through a city in 1953. Surrounded by normal 4-wheeled cars, the KR175 would have looked completely ridiculous. People would probably turn their heads, children would point, drivers might wonder if they were looking at some kind of experimental aircraft, and then the little machine would simply continue down the road. That's what makes it so memorable. It wasn't a prototype sitting in a museum. It wasn't a science fiction prop. It was actually sold to customers. People climbed inside these tiny capsules, started the little engine, and drove them on real streets. That's the part I still find hardest to believe. The 1953 Messerschmitt KR175 wasn't designed to be beautiful in the traditional sense. It wasn't designed to be luxurious. It wasn't designed to be powerful. It was designed to solve a very specific problem. How do you give ordinary people affordable transportation using as little material, fuel, and power as possible? Messerschmitt's answer was one of the strangest automobiles ever created. And honestly, that's why I love looking at it today. It reminds us that automotive history wasn't always about bigger engines and faster cars. Sometimes innovation meant going in the completely opposite direction. Make it smaller, make it lighter, make it simpler, and rethink everything about how a person sits inside a vehicle. When I first saw the KR175, I thought, there's no way this was a real car. Then I discovered the aircraft-style canopy, the tandem seating, the 3 wheels, the tiny engine, and the incredibly low weight, and the fact that people actually used it on public roads. Suddenly, it became even more fascinating. It wasn't a fighter jet, it wasn't a toy. It was a real 1953 automobile that looked like a fighter jet after someone forgot to give it wings.
Time I saw the 1956 BMW Isetta, I honestly thought someone had built a tiny refrigerator and put wheels underneath it. It was so small, so strangely shaped, and so different from a normal automobile that it almost looked like a toy. But then I noticed the strangest part. There were no normal doors on the sides. The entire front of the car opened. Yes, the front of the car was the door. You didn't climb in from the side like a normal vehicle. You simply opened the nose and walked straight into the cabin. And somehow, BMW actually sold thousands of these things. The Isetta appeared during a very different period in European automotive history.
After World War II, many people needed affordable transportation, but large cars were expensive to buy, expensive to operate, and difficult to drive through increasingly crowded cities. Manufacturers began looking for completely new solutions. Instead of building smaller versions of traditional cars, some companies started asking a much more radical question: what if the car itself could be dramatically smaller? The Isetta was one of the strangest answers. The little car had a tiny, rounded body that gave it the nickname of a bubble car. From the outside, it looked almost like an egg. The roof was rounded, the windows were large, the body was incredibly narrow, and the wheels were pushed almost completely to the corners. It didn't have the long hood and separate trunk that people normally associated with automobiles. It looked more like a compact capsule designed to carry 1 or 2 people. But then the front door is what makes the Isetta unforgettable. The entire front section of the body swung outward. The steering column was connected to the door, allowing it to move forward with the opening. So when you wanted to enter, you simply opened the front of the vehicle and stepped directly inside. Imagine doing that in a parking lot. Instead of opening a side door, you opened the entire front of the car. It sounds ridiculous, but it was actually a clever solution to a difficult engineering problem. Because the car was so short, there wasn't enough room for conventional side doors to operate comfortably in tight city parking spaces. The front entrance solved that problem. If the car was parked nose first against something, you could still potentially enter through the front. It also made the tiny cabin easier to access. The strangest feature was actually one of the most practical. The Isetta was also incredibly compact. It was designed specifically for urban transportation. You didn't need a huge engine. You didn't need a large trunk. You didn't need enormous amounts of passenger space. You simply needed enough room for a couple of people and a small amount of luggage. That made the Isetta perfect for crowded European cities. And then there's the engine. The BMW version used a tiny single-cylinder motorcycle-derived engine in its earliest form. Think about that for a second. You're looking at something officially considered an automobile, but the engine was closer in concept to what you'd expect to find in a motorcycle. That tiny engine was enough because the Isetta weighed so little. This is another reason the Isetta feels so strange compared with modern cars. Today, even small economy cars have powerful engines, sophisticated transmissions, airbags, computers, and layers of safety equipment. The Isetta was from another world. Its philosophy was much simpler. Keep the car tiny, keep it light, use a small engine, make transportation affordable. And surprisingly, that formula worked. The design also gave the Isetta a very unusual driving position. The driver and passenger sat close together inside the narrow cabin. There wasn't much space between the occupants and the surrounding bodywork. The large windows helped make the interior feel more open than the exterior suggested. From inside, you were surrounded by glass and could see much more of the world around you. Imagine driving one through a city in the 1950s. You're surrounded by large sedans and buses. Then there's this tiny BMW moving between them. It's barely wider than the driver. The roof is rounded, the front is almost vertical, and when you stop, the entire front of the vehicle opens. People must have stared. It probably looked like a science fiction capsule compared with the normal cars of the day. The Isetta also became surprisingly successful. BMW took the basic bubble car concept and developed it into a vehicle that could be sold to ordinary customers. It wasn't simply an experiment. People actually used Isettas for commuting, shopping, and everyday transportation. For many buyers, it offered something more important than performance: affordable mobility. And that's what I think makes the Isetta more interesting than just its bizarre appearance. It was created during a period when people were willing to rethink what a car needed to be. Maybe a car didn't need 4 normal doors. Maybe it didn't need a large engine. Maybe it didn't even need to look like a conventional automobile. The Isetta challenged all of those assumptions. The little BMW also became an important symbol of the post-war European microcar era. These tiny vehicles were designed for people who needed transportation but couldn't justify buying a large automobile. They used very little fuel, they occupied very little road space, and they were much easier to maneuver through crowded streets. Of course, the Isetta had obvious limitations. You weren't going to take a family of 5 on a long road trip. You weren't going to tow anything. And compared with modern cars, the level of protection was extremely basic. But that wasn't really the point. The Isetta wasn't trying to replace a large family car. It was solving a much smaller problem, getting 1 or 2 people around town cheaply and efficiently. What amazes me is how confidently BMW embraced the strange design. They could have made a tiny conventional car. Instead, they took the bubble car concept and made it part of their identity. The result became one of the most recognizable microcars in automotive history. Even people who know almost nothing about classic cars often recognize the Isetta immediately. And honestly, I think the front door is the perfect symbol of the entire car. It looks completely wrong. Then you think about why it exists. Suddenly, it makes sense. That's what makes clever engineering so interesting. Sometimes the strangest solution is actually the most logical one. When I first saw the 1956 BMW Isetta, I honestly thought someone had built a tiny refrigerator and put wheels underneath it. It was so small, so strangely shaped, and so different from a normal automobile that it almost looked like a toy. But then I noticed the strangest part. There were no normal doors on the sides. The entire front of the vehicle opened. Yes, the front of the car was the door. You didn't climb in from the side like a normal vehicle. You simply opened the nose and walked straight into the cabin. And somehow, BMW actually sold thousands of these things.
The first time I saw the 1959 Fiat 500 Jolly, I honestly couldn't figure out what I was looking at. It looked like someone had taken a tiny economy car, removed half of it, added some beach furniture, and somehow decided, yes, this is luxury transportation. The roof was gone. The doors were gone. The interior was filled with wicker-style seats, and the whole thing looked more like a miniature resort shuttle than an actual automobile. But the strangest part is that wealthy vacationers really did use these tiny cars. The Fiat 500 Jolly was based on the tiny Fiat 500, one of Europe's best-known economy cars. The normal 500 was designed to be affordable, practical, and easy to drive through crowded Italian streets. It was small because people needed inexpensive transportation. But then someone had a completely different idea. Why not turn this basic little city car into a luxury beach vehicle? That's where the Jolly came in. Instead of leaving the Fiat 500's normal body intact, the roof was removed, the doors disappeared, the upper sections of the body were dramatically modified, and in their place came an open-air cabin with distinctive seats that often used wicker-style construction. It was almost as if someone had taken a cheap commuter car and transformed it into a tiny piece of vacation furniture. And somehow, it worked. Not in the way you might expect. The Jolly wasn't trying to become a sports car. It wasn't trying to become more powerful. It wasn't trying to compete with expensive luxury automobiles. It was selling an experience. The experience of driving slowly along a sunny coastline in a tiny open car. Imagine arriving at an expensive resort. You expect to see large luxury sedans, convertibles, and expensive sports cars. Instead, someone pulls up in this tiny Fiat. No roof, no doors, wicker seats, tiny wheels. It almost looks comical. But during the 1950s and 1960s, that strange appearance became part of its charm. The Jolly became especially associated with wealthy customers and resort destinations. That sounds strange because the Fiat 500 itself was created as an affordable people's car, but the Jolly completely changed the meaning of the little Fiat. Instead of being a cheap way to commute to work, it became a fashionable accessory for vacations. It was small enough to drive around resorts, beaches, islands, and narrow coastal roads. That's probably the funniest part of its story. The same basic car that was designed to help ordinary people afford transportation could also become a novelty vehicle for wealthy vacationers. The difference wasn't really the mechanical foundation, it was the presentation. Remove the roof, remove the doors, add stylish seats, and suddenly the tiny economy car became a luxury lifestyle vehicle. The open design also made perfect sense for warm weather locations. There was no need for a traditional enclosed cabin when you were driving around a sunny resort. You could feel the breeze, you could see the scenery. Passengers could easily get in and out, and because the car was so small, it was perfect for navigating narrow roads where larger luxury cars would struggle. But from a modern perspective, the Jolly looks completely bizarre. Most cars try to protect passengers from the outside world. The Jolly does the opposite. You're almost completely exposed. There's no roof above you, there are no conventional doors around you. The body provides minimal protection. You're essentially sitting in an open-air cabin with a tiny engine behind you. And then you notice the wicker seats. That's where the whole thing becomes almost comical. Wicker is something you'd normally associate with patio furniture or beach chairs, not automobiles. Yet here it was, deliberately used as part of the Jolly's interior design. It gave the car a relaxed, resort-like character. The designers weren't trying to hide what the car was, they wanted it to look like a tiny vacation machine. Imagine driving one along the Italian coast in 1959. The sun is shining, the road follows the water, you're surrounded by beautiful scenery, and instead of driving a large luxury convertible, you're sitting in this tiny Fiat with wicker seats and no doors. Suddenly, the strange design makes sense. It wasn't about impressing people with horsepower, it was about making ordinary transportation feel like a vacation. The Jolly was also surprisingly expensive compared with the ordinary Fiat 500. That's what makes the whole idea even more interesting. You were essentially taking an inexpensive little city car and transforming it into a specialty vehicle. The modifications required additional work and craftsmanship, so the finished Jolly became much more exclusive than the basic Fiat underneath it. That exclusivity helped create its unusual reputation. The Jolly wasn't something you saw everywhere. It became associated with resorts, wealthy owners, celebrities, and people looking for something unusual. It was almost a fashion accessory with an engine, and in that sense, it was surprisingly successful. There's also something fascinating about the philosophy behind it. Most automotive designers are trying to solve problems: more space, better fuel efficiency, more power, improved safety, better handling. The Jolly wasn't really solving a major transportation problem. It was answering a completely different question. What if getting around a resort could be fun enough to become part of the vacation? And that's exactly what it did. The Jolly was also demonstrated how flexible the Fiat 500 platform was. The basic car was designed to be practical and affordable, but with a little imagination, it could become something completely different. A tiny open-air vehicle, a resort shuttle, a luxury novelty, a collector's car. The transformation is almost ridiculous, and that's why it's so memorable. Today, seeing a 1959 Fiat 500 Jolly is almost guaranteed to make people stop and look. It doesn't have the intimidating presence of a classic Ferrari. It doesn't have the aggressive shape of an American muscle car. It doesn't even look particularly serious. Instead, it makes people smile. And honestly, that may have been the entire point. When I first saw it, I thought someone had destroyed a Fiat 500. Then I discovered it was intentional. The roof was deliberately removed, the doors were deliberately removed, the wicker seats were deliberately installed, and wealthy vacationers actually paid money to drive them around resorts. That's when I realized just how strange automotive history can be. The 1959 Fiat 500 Jolly wasn't built to be the fastest car. It wasn't built to be the most practical. It was built to turn a tiny economy car into a rolling vacation. And somehow, against all logic, it became one of the most charming little luxury cars ever created.
1962 Renault 4? I honestly wondered how such a simple-looking car could become so important. It didn't look futuristic, it didn't look luxurious, and it certainly didn't look like something that would change the automotive world. It was boxy, tall, a little awkward, and its proportions looked almost completely wrong compared with the stylish cars of the early 1960s. But that's exactly what made the Renault 4 so clever. Instead of trying to make a beautiful car, Renault focused on making an incredibly useful one. At a time when many manufacturers were still designing cars around traditional layouts, Renault decided to rethink the small family automobile from the ground up. The Renault 4 was designed for ordinary people, families, workers, farmers, students, people who needed a car that could handle almost anything without becoming expensive or complicated. And that meant practicality came before appearance. The first thing you notice is the shape. The body looks almost like a simple box. The roof is relatively tall. The rear section rises almost vertically, and there are very few dramatic curves. Compared to an elegant Italian sports car from the same era, the Renault 4 looks almost unfinished. But every strange-looking part had a purpose. The tall body created more interior space. The large rear opening made loading cargo easier, and the simple shape made the vehicle easier and cheaper to manufacture. One of the most important features was the hatchback design. Instead of having a traditional trunk that opened separately, the Renault 4 had a large rear door that lifted upward. That meant you could carry objects that simply wouldn't fit into an ordinary sedan. You could fold the rear seats, load luggage, carry equipment, transport groceries, or even use the car almost like a tiny van. It was incredibly flexible. And that flexibility was one of the reasons the Renault 4 became so popular. It wasn't just a car for one specific purpose. It could be a family vehicle during the week, a work vehicle on the weekend, a delivery vehicle when necessary, and a simple commuter for everyday driving. The same car could adapt to completely different lifestyles. The interior followed the same philosophy. There was nothing unnecessarily complicated. The cabin was designed to be practical and easy to clean. The seats could be rearranged or removed depending on what you needed to carry. The floor was relatively flat, and the large rear opening made the cargo area surprisingly useful. It was almost like Renault had taken the idea of a small car and combined it with the flexibility of a van. But the Renault 4 wasn't just about carrying things. It was also designed to handle roads that weren't always smooth. That was especially important in rural areas. The suspension was designed to provide a comfortable ride over rough surfaces, and the car had enough ground clearance to handle roads where a low city car might struggle. It wasn't an off-road vehicle in the traditional sense, but it was surprisingly capable. And this is where the Renault 4 becomes much more interesting. The car looked simple because it was designed to be simple. It didn't need expensive technology, it didn't need a powerful engine, it didn't need complicated luxury equipment. Renault focused on the things ordinary drivers actually needed: reliability, low running costs, useful space, easy maintenance, and practicality. Imagine seeing one in 1962 next to a typical family sedan. The other car might look more elegant, it might have more chrome, it might have a more powerful engine. But then you open the Renault 4. The rear seats fold. The hatch opens almost like a small van. There's plenty of usable space. And suddenly the awkward little box starts making a lot more sense. That's what I find fascinating about this car. At first glance, it looks almost too simple to be serious. But the more you examine it, the more intelligent the design becomes. Every inch was being used. Every component had a purpose. The designers weren't trying to impress people standing outside the car. They were trying to make life easier for the people sitting inside it. The Renault 4 also became an important part of Renault's history because of how long and widely it was produced. It wasn't just a short-lived experiment. The model became one of Europe's most successful small cars and was produced in enormous numbers over its long production life. Millions of people eventually became familiar with this strange little box on wheels. And that's the funny thing. A car that initially looked almost ridiculous became incredibly successful. It didn't need dramatic styling to win customers. It simply solved everyday problems better than many more conventional cars. That is sometimes harder than designing something beautiful. The Renault 4 also represented a major change in how manufacturers thought about small cars.
Instead of treating a small car as simply a cheaper version of a larger automobile, Renault treated it as its own category. Small didn't have to mean useless, simple didn't have to mean primitive, and practical didn't have to be boring. The design also gave the car a unique personality. The tall roof, the short hood, the unusual rear profile, the simple front end, everything combined to create a shape that is instantly recognizable. Even today, you can see a Renault 4 and know exactly what it is. It doesn't need a badge to explain itself. Imagine driving one in Europe in the 1960s. You could take it through narrow city streets, drive it along country roads, load it with luggage, carry equipment, take the family on a trip, and then park it almost anywhere. It wasn't trying to be the most exciting car in the world. It was trying to be useful everywhere. And that may be the biggest reason for its success. The Renault 4 wasn't designed around what people thought a car should look like. It was designed around what people actually needed a car to do. That sounds obvious today, but it was a very important shift in automotive design. When I first saw the 1962 Renault 4, I thought it looked almost too ordinary to be interesting. Then I learned why it was shaped that way. The tall body, the practical hatchback, the flexible interior, the simple engineering, the ability to handle both city streets and rougher roads. Suddenly, the awkward proportions didn't look strange anymore. They looked smart. That's why the Renault 4 deserves a place on this list. It didn't become famous because it was the fastest. It wasn't the most luxurious. It certainly wasn't the most beautiful. It became famous because it understood something incredibly important. A great car doesn't always need to impress you. Sometimes it just needs to make everyday life easier. And that's exactly what the Renault 4 did. It looked like a simple box, but inside that box was one of Europe's smartest small car ideas.
The first time I saw the 1967 Subaru 1000, I honestly thought it was just another tiny Japanese family car. It looked simple, almost too simple. There were no dramatic fins, no exotic bodywork, and nothing about the exterior suggested that something unusual was happening underneath. But once I discovered what Subaru had put inside this little car, I realized I had completely underestimated it. Front-wheel drive, a boxer engine, a surprisingly advanced layout, and a design philosophy that was very different from what most people expected from a small Japanese car at the time. In the 1960s, Japan's automobile industry was developing incredibly quickly. Manufacturers were producing small cars designed for crowded cities and families who needed affordable transportation. But many small cars followed fairly conventional formulas: small body, small engine, simple rear-wheel drive layout. Nothing particularly revolutionary. Subaru decided to go in another direction, and the result was the Subaru 1000. The exterior doesn't immediately reveal what makes it special. That's probably my favorite thing about this car. From the outside, it looks almost ordinary. It's a compact four-door family car with a simple body and modest proportions. You could easily walk past one without giving it a second look. But underneath that ordinary-looking exterior was an engineering layout that would become extremely important to Subaru's identity. The biggest surprise was the front-wheel drive system. Instead of sending power to the rear wheels like many cars of the era, Subaru placed the engine and transmission at the front and drove the front wheels. That layout offered some major advantages. It created more usable interior space, it reduced the amount of mechanical equipment running through the cabin, and it helped make the car practical for everyday driving. For a small family car, that was a very smart solution. But Subaru didn't stop there. The engine was a Boxer 4. Instead of having the cylinders arranged vertically or in a traditional inline configuration, the pistons moved horizontally in opposite directions. That gave the engine a low center of gravity, and that mattered.
A lower engine helped keep the vehicle's weight closer to the ground, which could improve stability and handling. Today, the Subaru Boxer engine is one of the company's most recognizable engineering features. When people hear Subaru, many immediately think of horizontally opposed engines. But the roots of that philosophy go back much further than most people realize. The Subaru 1000 was one of the cars that established this unusual engineering direction. And that's what makes this little car so fascinating. The body looks completely ordinary, but underneath, Subaru was experimenting with ideas that would become part of the company's identity for decades. It's almost like opening the hood of an ordinary-looking family sedan and discovering that someone secretly built a completely different kind of machine underneath. The front-wheel drive layout also helped Subaru make better use of the car's small dimensions. There was no large drive shaft running through the center of the vehicle. That meant more room could be given to passengers. The cabin could feel surprisingly spacious for such a compact car. And for Japanese families in the 1960s, that was extremely important. Imagine parking a Subaru 1000 next to a larger sedan from the same period. The Subaru would look almost insignificant. Smaller body, smaller engine, less intimidating presence. But then you start looking at the engineering. Suddenly, the little Subaru becomes much more interesting. It wasn't trying to win attention with styling, it was using engineering to make the most of its limited size. Another important feature was the car's relatively light weight. A lightweight vehicle doesn't need an enormous engine to move efficiently. It also puts less demand on the brakes, suspension, and tires. For a compact family car, keeping weight under control made a lot of sense. Subaru was building a car around efficiency, rather than simply adding more power. And that's another thing that separates the Subaru 1000 from many American cars of the same era. In America, bigger engines and larger bodies were still extremely common. A small car could easily be dismissed as something cheap or basic. But Japanese manufacturers were becoming increasingly skilled at making small cars that used space and engineering very efficiently. The Subaru 1000 was a great example of that philosophy. The car also helped establish Subaru as something different from many of its competitors. Instead of simply copying popular automotive layouts, Subaru developed its own technical identity. Front-wheel drive, boxer engines, compact dimensions, and practical family-focused design. These ideas would continue appearing in Subaru vehicles long after the 1000 disappeared. That's why I find its appearance so deceptive. If you only look at it from the outside, you might think it's just another small old family car. But then you learn what it's doing underneath, and suddenly it becomes a completely different story. Imagine being a Japanese driver in the 1960s and seeing this new Subaru. You probably wouldn't expect anything extraordinary. It wasn't covered in chrome, it wasn't a sports car, it wasn't a luxury automobile. But once you drove it, you were experiencing a very different approach to small car engineering. The car was compact without feeling unnecessarily cramped. The engine layout was unusual, the drivetrain was efficient, and the whole vehicle was designed around making the most of limited space. The Subaru 1000 also helped demonstrate an important lesson in automotive design. A small car doesn't have to use small thinking. You can build a compact family car and still experiment with advanced engineering. You can make something affordable without making it mechanically boring. And you can create an important automobile without giving it an extravagant appearance. Looking back today, that's exactly what makes this little car so interesting. It doesn't look like a revolutionary car. It doesn't scream for attention. It doesn't have the dramatic styling of a concept car. But its engineering choices helped shape the direction Subaru would follow for decades. And that's why I think this little car deserves to be on the list. The 1967 Subaru 1000 wasn't trying to look futuristic. It was quietly building the foundation for Subaru's future. A compact body, front-wheel drive, a boxer engine, and an engineering philosophy that would eventually become one of the brand's defining characteristics. When I first saw it, I thought it was just another forgotten Japanese economy car. Then I discovered the boxer engine, then the front-wheel drive layout. Then I realized how important this little car was to Subaru's development. And honestly, that's the kind of discovery I love. Because sometimes the cars that look the most ordinary are hiding the most interesting stories. The Subaru 1000 didn't look revolutionary. It didn't need to. Its revolution was hiding underneath the body.